Coming up on episode 108 of Creative Writing, I'm talking about why your social media isn't growing.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Creative Writing. This is the podcast for you, a writer, blogger, or creative who wants to build an online platform without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether this is your first or 108th episode to listen to, I'm just really glad that you're listening. If you want to connect more and read the show notes, you can head over to creativewriting.com/108. And I started something new last week when I came back from my summer hiatus, and that is to leave kind of all the announcement-y type things and shout out from my patrons. They're all going to be at the very end of the show in what I decided to call the 5-minute frenzy. So for now, I'm going to dive right into our content. Last week, I started this 4-part series on why your audience isn't growing, and I talked about why your blog might not be growing. Now, this idea, or some of it, came from a Facebook group I'm in where somebody asked, just a question and said, I'm so frustrated. I'm doing all the things and my blog is not growing. What's wrong? And he left a link and I went and looked. And mostly people were saying, oh, you just need to promote more, join Pinterest, use Tailwind Tribes, you should set up Meet Edgar or Facebook group promotions and all of this stuff having to do with promotion. But when I looked at his blog, I saw 3 things. Actually, maybe he only had 2 of the 3, but it inspired me to think about the big 3 things that might cause your blog not to grow no matter how much you promote. And the first is that if you're just writing for yourself, not your audience. The second is if your blog design stinks. And those were the 2 he really suffered from. He was writing kind of like diary style posts. And no matter what, unless your life is super, super interesting, nobody really cares about what you did today. They just don't. So unless you're writing it for your audience and how you can kind of help and serve them, it's not going to really grow your blog. Design is another thing. You don't have to be amazing, but there's some really super simple templates out there for WordPress or Squarespace where you can just have a really clean, less is more kind of approach. And then the third thing, which I don't think he really suffered from, I didn't actually read his posts actually. So the third thing was writing voice and not having a unique enough writing voice that is distinguishable from other people. And I don't know about his because I had no desire to read his posts because they were not aimed at me. It was talking about his daily life. So those are the 3 big things. But the reality is so first you got to fix those things. But the reality is if you're not promoting on social media, people aren't going to find your blog unless you have really great SEO, which is search engine optimization. So having all the pieces put into place about actually growing, having people find your blog with search engines like Google. And that's kind of a complex process. Side note, I'm going to talk more about this later, but I do still through today, September 11th, I have a special on my book, 31 Small Steps to Grow Your Blog, and my course, Blog Growth Boost. And that talks a ton about SEO, and it's just $27. Just putting that out there. So if you're interested in learning more about SEO and other blog traffic strategies, you can go to creativewriting.com/blog book. So if you're not doing SEO really well, you have to promote on social media. So in the first episode 107, I did talk about those 3 mistakes you're making because if you don't fix those, social media is not going to help you. Now, social is only going to help you if you have an engaged, growing following, okay? We all know that. And I think it's really frustrating a lot of times with social because there are so many platforms and so many tips and so much advice and it's so cluttered of a space and it just can feel sometimes like nothing is happening. There's no traction. There's no traffic. You're not growing. Nobody's clicking over to your site. So I'm going to talk about 4 things, 4 reasons why your social media isn't growing, and then also how you can fix them. Okay, so the first reason that your social media isn't growing is because you aren't sharing relevant content. Kind of parallel to that blog problem where you're just writing about yourself and things that aren't interesting to other people. A lot of people are just sharing links to their own content. And while you should share links to your content if you want people to actually see your content, if you're only sharing links to your content, then it's going to be really difficult for people to stay interested for long. It just makes you seem pretty self-absorbed. There's a general rule that people talk about, the 80-20 rule, that you should share 80% of other people's content and 20% of yours. Now, I don't ever sit down and think about percentages or anything like that, but I think it's good to just keep in mind the idea that you should be sharing as much of other people's stuff as your own, if not more. And this is that idea of being a curator. So we're creators when it comes to our content, but if you're a curator, it's like you're putting together all of the pieces on a gallery wall, all of the pieces of art that are going to hang. You don't just want a piece here and a piece there. You want to have a good mix of things that kind of go together, that have a sort of theme. And I'm saying this not as someone who's ever done a gallery, but in terms of a social media gallery, okay? Because if you're a gallery owner, you might be like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're right, I don't. But in terms of curation of social media content, you want to have things that are all going to be reaching that ideal audience member. So you want to be sharing content that is relevant to them, but it doesn't just come from you. So the fix for this is you want to think about what would add to the conversation that you're starting with what you write. So what would kind of supplement or complement the content you're already creating? So you want to look for people who are creating quality content in your same space, and maybe not a direct competitor. So I like to not think of people as competitors, but in terms of, if you have a product and somebody else has like the same exact product or the same exact book, I think you can at least consider that. But I also know, there's people in my circle like Mira Kothan, and she's a huge email nerd like me. She has an email course like me, and I still pin her content and share her content and support her. And she does the same for me, but I'm just not going to share maybe the links to buy her course. So, you can think about it like that. You may not want to share anything from somebody who kind of is directly doing what you're doing, but maybe you just don't want to share the paid thing, or maybe you want to find people in your space who are creating different kind of content, but would still speak to your audience. And then maybe you could think about, outside of links, just what kind of encouragement people could use, what kind of, inspirational quotes, if that's your thing. That's not my thing, but a lot of people love those on social media. What memes or GIFs, or if you pronounce them this way, GIFs. Think about the different things that you could curate and put together that would go along with sort of the theme that you're creating with your content. That would be a complement to that. So you want to be a good curator of content, not just sharing your own stuff. The second reason that your social media isn't growing is that you aren't being social. So when social media started, it really was social. I joined Facebook in 2005. 2005. So I was one of the earliest people. I can't actually remember what year Facebook started, but this was back when you actually had to be a student at a university to join Facebook. And I was in grad school. So I was one of the older people in my program. Most of the people came right out of college. So they were like 22, 23, and I was, I think 20, was I 27? 27? I don't do math well, y'all. So I think I was 27 when I started grad school. So I was like old to them. And the way that everybody talked about what we were doing when we were meeting at the bar, what we were going to meet up and do after a workshop, and all the different things that we did in my creative writing program, they talked on Facebook. That's how we all arranged it. And so they made me get on Facebook. And I think they made me get on MySpace too. So I actually used MySpace way more than Facebook, but we used both. And that was how we talked. We were social. I didn't share links to anything. I didn't even have a blog back then, you guys. So it was just literally people talking. It wasn't what it is today. That's how it started. Now, just like blogging has sort of organically evolved, so has social media. Now it is about being social, but also sharing content. But I feel like we've gone so far over into the sharing content side that we're all overloaded with content. And we really need to be social. If you're not having conversations with people, and if you're not actually present on the platforms, a lot of times we are trying to make our life easier. We don't have a lot of time. So we're automating and scheduling everything. So we're never actually going to Twitter. We're just going to Buffer. We're never actually going to Facebook. We're going to CoSchedule or Post Planner or Meet Edgar. So if we're automating everything, we can't be social. The fix for this, and this is pretty obvious, is you actually have to show up and go to those platforms. So here are some ideas for how specifically you can show up and kind of join actual conversations. When you have people who share, like, or comment on your posts, whether that's, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, reply back, comment back, like back, whatever, platform it is. And I think it's really neat when people either follow you on social media like Twitter, or if they retweet something, to hit reply, and just, even if you're saying thanks, or if you want to go a step further, and I think this is a really great way to make connections, check out the person's profile. If you don't already follow them and they seem relevant, follow them. Why not? And then if there's some detail that you can pull from their profile that you could say, thanks for sharing, I love coffee too. Because you guys have to know that my profile on Twitter shares that I love coffee. So that would be me. But other people, I found people that have different things that I can kind of hook into and reply to and talk about. Now, hint for you, if you're setting up your social profile, it's really good to have kind of one juicy personal or interesting tidbit in there. You want to talk about who you are, especially Twitter, you don't have a lot of room. But I have more people talk about coffee to me and the Oxford comma, which is also in my Twitter bio, than anything else. So if you want to take it a step further, when you comment, reply, or when you follow somebody, if you take that extra time, check out their bio, which is short, right? Takes a couple seconds to read it, and then reply or speak to them and talk about their bio, something in it, that goes a long way. Another thing that you could do is to go live in Facebook rather than just drop links, engage with your audience, do Q&As or office hours. You could join Twitter chats. And I think Twitter chats are one of the most social things that you can do. It's a great way to get followers because often people who are taking part in a Twitter chat will follow each other and start to actually have conversation. So that's a really good way to engage and create community. You can also try something like an Instagram hop where people on a particular day join a hashtag. Like there's one called It's Simply Tuesday by Emily P. Freeman, or Friday Introductions from Jess Connolly and Haley Morgan. I'm not super active on Twitter and I don't really take part in these, but this is something where people tend to look for the hashtag and go comment and follow and actually talk to each other. So anytime that you can actually go to the platform, have conversations with people, and be social, you are much more likely to grow your social media presence. The third reason your social media isn't growing is that you aren't laser focused. So I mentioned in the beginning that it's really overwhelming to have all these platforms on social media, to not know where to be or go. There's just so much. And what often happens is that you try too many things at one time. You're on 5 platforms trying to manage them all. And so then what you do is, to manage them all, you go to the automation and scheduling, like I talked about in the second reason, but you'll have things auto post from one platform to the other. So here's the thing. Each platform is different. Okay. You know this, we know this, but they have really serious differences in image sizes, differences in whether or not to use hashtags, differences in how many characters they'll allow in a share, differences in how tagging works. And so often what I'll see somebody do is, I'll be on Facebook, but I see an Instagram post I'll see a photo, but it's an Instagram post and they're tagging somebody, but it doesn't show up as a tag in Facebook. It just looks like the @ symbol and a name that you don't ever see because it's a tag on Instagram. It doesn't transfer over. And then there's a bunch of hashtags and nobody really uses hashtag on Facebook. Even worse, on Twitter, a lot of times the sharing thing that they use doesn't show the image at all. It'll show like, today we were at the beach and ... And then I'll have a link that's like Instagram ... whatever. And so those kinds of posts are really not effective. It's the way you're trying to be on all the platforms at once, but it's like scattershot, like shooting a shotgun and just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff out there. It really does not work. It does not help your engagement. And often I found that my audience members on one platform are not the same as on another. And so you really need to treat each one as its own platform. Okay. It works much better that way. Yes, you can totally automate all that stuff, but you're not going to really grow any of those platforms. Maybe the first one you post on, the one that auto posts everywhere else, maybe that one. But if you really want to grow that one, focus on that one. If you want to grow a platform, what I would suggest is this, to focus on one or two. And then when you really have things down and maybe you have a system and maybe you have, a way that you are able to engage in conversations every day on that platform and are able to do those things, then you can, increase and go to 3 and 4 or 5, depending on how many platforms you want to go to. You need to take into consideration all of those different quirks and nuances. So that the fix is that start with 1 to 2 platforms, and they should be ones you really like, because why else would you want to be there? and also ones where your ideal people hang out. And I think really most of the platforms have so many people you can find them, but I do think that's something that you should consider. And then consider how you can do an overarching strategy for those platforms. What are you going to use to schedule and automate? When are you going to show up and talk live to people? Or not live, but just at least have conversations. And then again, when you get those 1 to 2 platforms down pat, then you can expand. But I would definitely not recommend kind of having things auto post from one platform to 2 to 3 other platforms. It just looks messy, it looks unprofessional, and it's not going to help you grow those other platforms. And the last reason, number 4, why your social media isn't growing is because you're participating in too many share groups. Now, this is the one where you might be scratching your head because you're thinking, wait, aren't share groups, the whole purpose of them is to grow, right? And to get more traffic. Yes, but they're not all created equal. So let's talk about this, about share groups. If you're not familiar with them, a lot of these take place on Facebook, but they are on other platforms. And they're a group on Facebook where there are daily or weekly threads that will say things like Tuesday social share your latest post from Facebook, and then go like and comment on every other post in the thread. There's different rules. So it may not say you have to, comment or whatever on everything in there. Maybe you have to just do the one above and below. Maybe it's pick 2 from here. It's really different per one, but I see a lot of these share groups, and I've been in ones before where it's you have to do whatever for everybody in the group. I'll give this example. So back when Google Plus was being used more frequently and I knew it was good for SEO, I started using Google Plus. And I noticed one of my friends, even though I only had, I had a bunch of followers on there, not a ton, but, pretty good number. But I would be getting like 1 to 2 pluses, which are like likes on my posts. And she had 50. And I was like, what in the world? She didn't have very many more followers than I did. So I emailed her and said, hey, what are you doing that has all this engagement on your Google Plus posts? And she said, oh, I'm in this amazing Facebook group. You should join. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay. So I joined. And essentially every day you could choose or not choose to join or not. There'd be a thread where you posted a link directly to that Google Plus post. And then everybody you're required to go plus every single post in the group. So if there are 50 people in the thread, you would get 50 or 49 because you're taking yourself out. Look, I did math, you guys. You'd get 49 pluses, ideally, from that thread. And they would say, we're going to check this. So if you don't do it, you can't participate in the next thread and we'll kick you out. So what I found was this. The first time I did it, I was like, okay, this is fine. I was kind of starry-eyed. It was really nice, you guys, to see like 50 or 49 pluses on a particular post when I'd had like 1 to 2. It makes you look better. And social engagement is helpful for things like SEO and Google making your posts show up more. But what I found is even that first day, there were a few things I was like, I'm not a huge fan of this, but I mean, okay, what's a plus? I'll just throw a plus their way. By the 3rd or 4th thread I was in, there were the same few people who posted really stupid stuff. Okay. There was one person I remember, and this is nothing against Canadians, but she was a Canadian coupon blogger. So this was nothing that was relevant to most of the people who were following me. And in addition to that, instead of doing the best practices for Google Plus, where you share a big vertical image and there were certain kind of formatting things for how you write a Google Plus post, she would literally just post the link. And so it would pull this tiny, tiny image and it would not have any description. And if you clicked through, it was just like a way to print a coupon for Canada, for things in Canada, not just, hey, here's a coupon, go buy Canada. It was like a coupon for products and things in Canada. So it was really, really specific to a specific audience that wasn't me or a lot of people in my audience. And so I got really frustrated because, again, these just weren't, there were other ones too, but most of them would just drop a link or it was something not relevant to other people. And so I emailed the group moderator and was like, hey, could you talk to these people who are posting like really crappy stuff? Because we're all having to plus it and I don't want to. So she kept doing it and nobody would change. And after a while, it felt so icky because I didn't want to have to plus things I didn't like. Most of the content was great and I didn't mind doing it. But I couldn't stay and keep doing it. And then the other thing was, as soon as I left the group, I was back to 1 or 2 pluses. It had no long-term results. And that's the problem with most of these share groups. Instead of reaching your target audience, you're reaching other bloggers who may be your target audience, but they may not be, especially if you're like a mom running a mom blog about momming. Going to a group of mom bloggers, even though they are also moms, they're bloggers and their focus is just like yours to get other moms to read their blog. And if you don't have time to read their blog and you're just going into this thread, doing what you're supposed to do and liking or commenting on a post, you're not becoming a fan. You're not becoming somebody who subscribes to get all their emails. You're not somebody who's really going to support them in the long run. You're just doing what you were told in a group. And the same kind of thing with Instagram pods. And I saw a conversation about this recently, and somebody was saying that they really enjoy them because they're in one with people where they like all the content. So it's really easy. It's not a big deal. They would kind of comment on it anyway. That's great. But most of the time, Instagram pods, which are kind of like little groups on Instagram itself, where you can kind of link to your latest post and everybody will go and comment on it and engage on it. But here's the reality with all those things. They're creating a false sense of engagement. It may make you feel good about yourself to get 50 comments on your blog post, but it's not authentic engagement. It's not your target audience. It's nothing that's going to last. It's not really growing your platform. So there are good share groups. There are good ways to do this. And I think Facebook groups can really grow your platform. I actually shared something for the first time in a LinkedIn group the other day and saw a big spike in traffic from people. Actually, people didn't just click through there. They took my link and then shared it on Twitter. So it was kind of cool. So people were multiplying my message for me because I shared in this one LinkedIn group. You want to find your target audience, okay? These groups can be a place to do it, but if it's one of those ones where it's required that you share things, even if it's not in your niche, if it's not something that would serve your audience, it's making you a bad curator of content. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to dilute your brand by sharing things that just aren't interesting to you. And it's also not fair to that person because if your audience isn't a good fit for them, you don't want to share it. And also sometimes there are things that are unethical, like posts with tons of affiliate links and no disclosures. I definitely will never share those. And sometimes in groups that have good share threads, I'll see a piece of content, I would share it, except I notice there's tons of affiliate links that are not disclosed properly. And so I'm not going to share it. So you need to look out for groups that have a thread where maybe you're encouraged to share something that fits your audience or share, X number of things if you're going to post. And often they'll have quality content. And if you're in a group where nobody's posting quality content, maybe you should leave. And I'm not being a jerk. I'm just being serious. Like, why are you there? If there's not other people who are at the level where you want to be, then don't waste your time there. So again, this fourth one, these share groups can be okay, but often the ones that require so much of you, they just give you a feeling of success, but it's not real. Engagement is not authentic. And so these are the 4 reasons that your social media may not be growing. You're not posting relevant content. You're only posting your own. So you're not being a good curator. You're not being social on social media. You're just kind of posting links and running. You're being, I like to call that like self media instead of social media because you're just talking about yourself. You aren't laser focused on 1 or 2 platforms. And so you're not doing any of them well because you're just kind of doing a little bit on each. And then you're in too many share groups and you're wasting time doing things that aren't creating authentic engagement. So those are the 4 reasons that your social media isn't growing. And what I'll say is this, if you want your blog to grow, and you want to get more traffic and more shares and have more people find you, your blog has to have those 3 things fixed. You need to have content that's relevant to other people. You need to have a clean, good design. You need to also have a writing voice that's unique to you. And all those are things that you can work on. So once you have that in place, then you need to be sharing and promoting on social media. But if you're doing any of these 4 mistakes, it's going to be really hard to grow your social media and really hard to get good engagement on your social. So now you have 4 things to go work on if you haven't already. And as a caveat to this, I'm currently breaking a bunch of these rules. And I'll say that because I know that I'm breaking them. And right now, with the time that I have, which is super, super limited, my focus is not growing my social platforms. My focus is building up the community that I have on email, building up the community in my Facebook group, and also building up the community that formed from my Patreon supporters. And so that's my focus right now. My social, I would love for it to just grow steadily behind the scenes, and it kind of does, but it doesn't take big leaps because I'm not investing. I'm not being social. I'm not doing a lot of these things, and I'm not even posting my content a lot of the time on these platforms. I'm not, it's not that I'm posting only my content. It's like I'm not posting a lot anyway. And that's an intentional choice. So if you're going and checking and you're like, you haven't posted anything on Twitter in 5 days. Well, no, I really haven't. Or I have some things automated to share other people's content that I like. But yeah, I'm automating a bunch of stuff and dialing it in because that's not my focus right now. But if your focus is on growing social media, then you need to work on these 4 things. Okay. And if not, then you can let these things take a backseat because that's what I'm doing right now. But when it comes to me wanting to actually really grow and build up a platform, then I'm going to take a hard look at these things and actually go and do them. So just so you know, in case you're going and stalking me and being like, what a hypocrite. No, I'm intentionally not doing some of these things right now to make room in my life to do others. So let's move into the 5-minute frenzy. And this is where I'm going to share news and updates and also recognize my Patreon supporters. So the first thing I want to say is a huge thank you to Jasmine Commerce, who provides the music for the show for free. She is amazing. And I wanted to make it easier for you guys to find her. So I created a quick link for you where you can go to createifwriting.com/music and get right to Jasmine's site to check out more of her music or go see her. She's in California. So if you're local, go see her live. She is amazing. I've heard her. She's not one of those people who sounds good recorded and then not good live. She's awesome. So that's the first thing. I want to recognize the featured community member of the week, who is Susie Taylor Oakley of towellwithyou.com. She talks about the journey to wellness and well-being and has a really cool freebie on how to say no gracefully that I think we could all use. Now, if you're wondering how to be a featured community member, that has to do with Patreon. I just started a new Patreon, and if you don't know, Patreon is a third-party donation site where you can go and pledge to sponsor the show. And what that essentially looks like, it's kind of my version of a membership site. There's exclusive benefits for the people who support the show, and you can support the show for as little as $1 per episode. This includes rewards like being a featured community member on the podcast. And at a certain level, you'll get to join the exclusive Facebook community, which is a really tight-knit group of amazing, amazing people. So if you want to check that out, you can go to createifwriting.com/Patreon. And I want to say a big thank you to all of my other patrons. Those include Stephanie Nickel, Mary Dennis, Pamela Hill, Marianne West, Tanya Goya, Elizabeth Elena, Jenny Kokas, Matt Brady, Mira Kothan, Roland Denzel, Christine Griffin, Andy Cumbo Floyd, Tisha Messing, Christina Goodner, and Sarah Kennedy. I am so thankful for all of you guys for being there, for supporting the show. And if you go and check out my Patreon page, you'll see that currently, as I am speaking this, I am $1 away from my first level, my first goal. And the goals are kind of things that you set up. And that first goal was $50 per podcast episode. And when I reach 50 per episode, which is the next time anyone pledges $1, I'm going to do a special bonus episode. And this will be a public episode. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to feature questions from you guys in the community, from my patrons, and give you guys shout outs and links to your site right here on the podcast. So if you want to check that out, again, you can go to createifwriting.com/Patreon. And if you want to join my overall free community, which is 1,300 plus members strong of really great people, you can go to createifwriting.com/community. And this week we had a really interesting discussion about why blogging courses are so expensive. And I really would encourage you guys to go over there. I actually ended up doing a live video about this, explaining some of the reasons for this. But I do want to say that I have a course that is not super expensive and that really has a ton of content, and I'm still adding to it because I'm a perfectionist in weird ways. And so like you wouldn't know from looking at my crazy office around me that I'm a perfectionist, but I want to do things over the top. So my course is called Blog Growth Boost. It's all about generating traffic to your site. So the first module is all about setting your site up, kind of dealing with those things that I talked about in last week's podcast episode, where you need to have your house in order before you start growing, because if people come to your site and see a lot of grossness, they're not going to stay. And then the second thing is all about SEO. So setting up that search engine optimization. And I have a ton of interviews that were from this summer when I did free summer school, and more than that in there. But that's all about how to set up your site for SEO. And then the third section is social media, where you're going to learn a bit more about social media and how to rock those platforms. And then I added another section after kind of already selling some of the courses. I realized there was one thing missing, and that is connections with other people. And I don't see a lot of people talking about that, but connections with other people really can take you farther than a lot of other things, especially when you're just starting out, but even when you've been blogging for a while. And as an example, every so often, there's a Facebook page that's kind of large that shares some of my posts on parenting. And when they do, I will often see a spike of 5,000 to 10,000 page views in that day. You guys. So this is one of those things where sometimes getting in front of somebody else's audience can have a huge effect on you. This package that I'm doing, the bundle, is with my book, 31 Small Steps to Grow Your Blog, plus Blog Growth Boost, and it's $27. This is super affordable. The course alone is $97 normally. This bundle's only through today, September 11th. So I do want you to go ahead and get that. And if it's interesting to you, if you need to grow your blog. So you can find out more if you go to creativewriting.com/blog book. That is it for today, you guys. I'm so thankful again that you were here. I hope that you stay connected to this podcast and to the community at large, because it really is a thriving, fantastic community of people. If you want to subscribe and get my weekly updates on Fridays, you can go to creativewriting.com/quick fix. And I've started using a Facebook Messenger bot, which everybody said they loved last week, which basically is going to just literally drop the link to this episode when it's up. Every time I have a new episode, it'll just send you something through Facebook Messenger. So if you'd like a little nudge and reminder of when the podcast episode is out, you could just go to my site, creativewriting.com, and up at the very top, you'll see where you can sign up to have this delivered by Facebook Messenger bot. And you'll get to see the Kiki bot, which is not an image you'll soon forget. So head over there to see that and try out the Facebook Messenger bot to see if you actually like it. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that you have an inspired week and grow that social media.